It is early morning. The kind of early that used to feel like a beginning and now feels more like a continuation. The light outside is gray, not yet fully arrived. I am sitting in a chair by the window, holding a cup of tea that has gone slightly cold because I forgot to drink it while it was still warm. This happens more often now. Not forgetting, exactly. More like drifting. More like the space between intending and doing has stretched wider than it used to be. I have been awake for some time, an hour, maybe more. It is difficult to say. The clock on the wall tells me it is just after 6, but that number feels arbitrary. What does it mean to be 6 in the morning? When I was younger, 6 meant something. It meant I had a limited window before the day began in earnest. It meant a countdown. Now, 6 is just a number the clock happens to show. The day does not begin in earnest anymore. It begins slowly, if it begins at all. And yet, somehow, by the time evening comes, I find myself wondering where it went. This is the question I have been sitting with lately, not because I want to answer it, but because it keeps arriving, uninvited, in the quiet moments. Why does time feel more limited now, even though my days are less full than they have ever been? I do not work anymore. I have not worked in several years. My children are grown and living their own lives, in their own cities, with their own concerns. My obligations are few. My calendar, once crowded with appointments and deadlines and places I needed to be, is mostly empty. I can wake when I want. I can sleep when I want. I can spend an entire afternoon reading a book, or watching the birds outside, or simply sitting here, doing nothing at all. And yet time feels scarce. It feels pressed. It feels like something I am running out of, even though I cannot point to what is using it up. This is not a complaint. I am not unhappy. I am simply noticing something that I did not expect to notice. I thought that when the busyness ended, the feeling of rush would end with. I thought that when the obligations fell away, the sense of being behind would fall away too. But it did not. If anything, it has intensified. The less I have to do, the more finite each day seems. The more open my hours, the more I am aware of their edges. I have tried to explain this to myself in the usual ways. Perhaps it is mortality. Perhaps I am simply aware, at my age, that the years remaining are fewer than the years behind. Perhaps the hourglass has become visible in a way it was not before, and I am watching the sand with an attention I never gave it when I was young. That explanation makes sense. It is probably true, in part, but it does not feel complete. It does not explain why a Tuesday afternoon, when I have nothing planned and nowhere to be, can feel more compressed than a Tuesday afternoon 20 years ago, when I was juggling 3 meetings and a deadline and a child who needed to be picked up from school. It does not explain why doing less can feel like having less. So I sit with the question, not trying to solve it, not trying to reach a conclusion, just sitting with it, the way one might sit with an old friend who has come to visit and does not need to be entertained. The question is here. I am here. The morning light is slowly arriving, and for now, that is enough. I think about my father sometimes, in these early hours. He lived to be 83, and in his final years, he often remarked on how quickly time moved. I remember not understanding what he meant. I was in my 40s then, deep in the thick of life, and time felt neither fast nor slow to me. It simply felt like time. It was the medium I moved through. The way water is the medium a fish moves through. I did not think about it. I did not notice it. It was just there. But my father noticed it. He would sit in his chair by the window, a chair not unlike the one I am sitting in now, and he would say things like, "Where did the week go?" Or, "It seems like yesterday was Monday." And I would nod politely, not really listening, already thinking about the next thing I needed to do. Now I understand what he meant. Not because I have figured something out, but because I have arrived somewhere. I have arrived at the place where time becomes visible, where it stops being the medium and starts being the subject, where you notice it the way you notice air when the air becomes thin. I wish I had asked him more about it. I wish I had sat with him in those moments and said, "Tell me what you mean. Tell me what it feels like." But I was too busy. I was too full of my own momentum. I did not have time to ask about time. There is something almost funny about that. Almost. The tea is completely cold now. I should get up and make a fresh cup, but I do not get up. I stay in the chair. The light is a little brighter than it was a few minutes ago. The gray is turning silver. Soon it will turn gold, if the clouds permit. And I will still be here, thinking about this question that has no answer, or perhaps has too many answers, or perhaps is not really a question at all, but simply a condition, a way of being, a weather inside the mind. Why does time feel more limited as we grow older, even when our days become less structured than before? I do not know. But I am going to stay with it for a while. I am going to let it unfold at its own pace, in its own way. I am going to see what it has to show me, if it has anything to show me at all. And if it does not, that is fine too. Sometimes the value of a question is not in the answering, but in the asking. Sometimes the value is simply in the company it keeps. When I was young, and by young I mean anything before 60, which is itself a strange way to measure youth, I imagined retirement as an expanse, a wide open field with no fences, no gates, no paths I was required to follow. I would have time, I thought, oceans of it. I would read all the books I had been meaning to read. I would learn things I had always wanted to learn. I would sit and think long thoughts without interruption. And in some ways, this has come true. The fences are gone. The gates are open. The paths are optional. I can read if I want. I can think if I want. I can do nothing at all if I want. But the expanse does not feel like an expanse. It feels like something else entirely. It feels like a room that is somehow both larger and smaller than it appeared from the outside. Larger because there is more space than I know what to do with. Smaller because the walls seem closer than they should be, given how little is inside. I have thought about this often. I have tried to make sense of it. And what I have come to, slowly, hesitantly, is something I might call the paradox of empty hours. When my days were structured, when they were filled with work and obligation, and the constant press of things that needed doing time felt abundant, even though it was scarce. I never had enough of it, but I never felt like I was running out of it either. It was like a river that kept flowing, carrying me along, depositing me somewhere new each day. I did not think about where the river was going. I was too busy navigating the current. Now the river has slowed. In some places, it has stopped entirely. I am no longer carried along. I am floating. Or perhaps I am sitting on the bank, watching the water move past without me. And this is when the strangeness sets in. This is when time begins to feel limited in a way it never did before. I think it has something to do with anticipation, or rather, with the absence of it. When I was working, each day was a prelude to the next. Monday led to Tuesday. Tuesday led to Wednesday. The week led to the weekend, and the weekend led to the next week. There was always something coming, something waiting, something on the horizon. The present moment was never quite complete in itself. It was always reaching forward, pointing toward what came next. This gave time a certain texture. It made each day feel like a bead on a string, connected to other beads, part of a longer chain. I did not experience days individually. I experienced them as part of a sequence, a rhythm, a pattern that extended into the future. Now the pattern has dissolved. The sequence has broken. Each day is less like a bead on a string and more like a bead sitting alone on a table. It is connected to nothing. It leads to nothing. It is just itself, isolated and complete. You might think this would make each day feel more expansive. You might think that a day freed from the burden of anticipation would feel longer, fuller, more spacious. But in my experience, the opposite is true. A day that is only itself, that is not reaching toward tomorrow, feels strangely compressed. It folds in on itself. It takes up less room than it should. I noticed this first in the way I wake up now. When I was working, waking up was an event. It was the starting gun of the day, the moment when everything began. There was urgency in it, even if the urgency was mild. I had somewhere to be, something to do, a schedule to keep. The alarm would ring, and I would rise, and the day would unfold, according to a plan that was mostly out of my hands. Now, waking up is different. It is gradual, unhurried, almost imperceptible. I drift from sleep to wakefulness the way dawn drifts from darkness to light. There is no starting gun. There is no urgency. There is just the slow emergence of consciousness, followed by the slow emergence of the day. This sounds pleasant, and in many ways it is. I am grateful for it. I would not trade it for the old way, with its alarms and its pressures and its relentless forward motion. But I have noticed that this gentler waking comes with a cost. The day that begins without urgency somehow ends without substance. Not because nothing happened, but because nothing had to happen. Nothing was required. Nothing was at stake. I find myself, on many mornings, looking at the hours ahead and feeling a vague anxiety. Not about what I have to do. I have very little I have to do. But about what I will do. The openness that once seemed like a gift now seems like a question. The freedom that once seemed like liberation now seems like a kind of weightlessness. And weightlessness, I have learned, can feel very much like falling. I remember a conversation I had with a neighbor a few years back. He was a few years older than me, recently widowed, living alone in a house that had once been full of children and noise and activity. I asked him how he was doing, and he said something that has stayed with me ever since. The days are long, he said, but the years are short. At the time, I thought I understood what he meant. The days are slow because there is nothing to fill them. The years are fast because they pile up without markers, without events, without the punctuation that used to give them shape. But now I think there is more to it than that. Now I think he was describing something about the relationship between structure and time, between activity and duration, that I am only beginning to understand. When our days are structured, we experience time as a kind of container. The structure gives us walls, a floor, a ceiling. We can feel time as a bounded space, something we are inside of, something that holds us. And paradoxically, this containment makes time feel expansive. We are aware of its edges, and this awareness makes the interior feel large. When our days are unstructured, the container dissolves. There are no walls, no floor, no ceiling. Time becomes ambient, diffuse, everywhere and nowhere. We are no longer inside it. We are adrift in it. And this drifting, which should feel like freedom, instead feels like a kind of smallness. Without edges, we cannot gauge the size of anything. Without structure, we cannot measure duration. The days bleed into each other, and the years slip past, and we are left wondering where it all went. This is the paradox of empty hours. The more time we have, the less we seem to experience it. The less we have to do, the more quickly the doing is done. The freer our days, the smaller they become. I do not say this to complain. I say it because it surprises me. I say it because it is not what I expected, and I am still trying to make sense of it. When I imagined this part of my life, I imagined slowness. I imagined long afternoons stretching out like summer fields. I imagined the luxury of lingering, the pleasure of pause. I thought that when the rush ended, the feeling of rush would end with it. But the feeling has not ended. It has only changed its shape. It is no longer the feeling of having too much to do and too little time to do it. It is the feeling of having too much time and not knowing what to do with it. It is the feeling of days that pass without effort, of weeks that vanish without memory, of months that accumulate into years before I have noticed their passing. The old rush was external. It was imposed by schedules, deadlines, obligations. It was something outside me that pressed upon me. The new rush is internal. It is something I carry inside me, something that persists even in the absence of external pressure. It is the feeling of time running out, not because I have somewhere to be, but simply because time runs. It runs and runs and runs, regardless of what I do or do not do with it. Sometimes I try to slow it down. I try to be present, as they say. I try to notice things. The steam rising from my tea, the pattern of light on the floor, the sound of birds outside the window. And sometimes this works. Sometimes I can catch a moment and hold it, turn it over in my hands, feel its weight and texture before it slips away. But more often, I find that I cannot. More often, The moment passes before I have finished noticing it. I am still reaching for it when it is already gone, already replaced by the next moment, which will also pass before I can grasp it. This is not a failure of attention. My attention is fine. It is the moments themselves that are slippery. They are designed to pass. They are built for passing. They are not meant to be held. And when I try to hold them, they dissolve in my hands like snow. I think about the summers of my childhood sometimes. They seemed endless then. They stretched out before me like a lifetime. I could not see the end of them. I could not even imagine the end of them. Each day was a continent. Each week a world. Each month an eon. And this was not because I was doing anything particularly memorable. I was just a child, playing, reading, wandering, doing the ordinary things that children do. But ordinary was enough. Ordinary was infinite. What made those summers feel so long? I have wondered about this many times, and the best answer I can find is this. I had no future then. Or rather, the future was so distant, so abstract, so unimaginable, that it might as well have not existed. I lived in the present because the present was all there was. Tomorrow was a concept, but it was not a reality. It did not pull on me. It did not call me forward. It left me alone in the now, and the now expanded to fill the entire horizon. Now the future is different. The future is real. The future is pressing. I can feel it ahead of me, closer than it has ever been, like a wall approaching in the dark. I do not know exactly where it is, but I know it is there. And this knowledge changes everything. This knowledge compresses the present into something smaller, something provisional, something that is always ending even as it begins. I do not fear the future, or rather, I do not fear it in a way that consumes me. It is not dread that I feel, not anxiety, not panic. It is something subtler than that. It is simply awareness. The awareness that the future is finite. The awareness that the years remaining are countable, even if I do not know the count. The awareness that each day I spend is a day subtracted from a total that is not infinite. This awareness does something to time. It speeds it up. It makes it feel scarce, even when it is plentiful. It makes each hour feel like a dwindling resource, even when the hours are empty and slow. I have tried to talk about this with friends, with family, with anyone who might understand. And some of them do understand. They nod. They agree. They say, yes, this is what it feels like. This is what I have noticed too. But others do not understand. Others look at me with puzzlement, or sympathy, or concern. They think I am worried about death. They think I am anxious about the end. They offer reassurances that I do not need, solutions to a problem I am not describing. What I am describing is not a problem. It is not something that needs to be fixed. It is simply a condition, a state, a way of experiencing time that comes with age. It is neither good nor bad. It simply is. And maybe that is why I am spending so much time with it. Not to solve it, but to understand it. Not to change it, but to see it clearly. Because seeing clearly is its own kind of value. Even when what you see is puzzling. Even when what you see has no resolution. The paradox of empty hours. The fullness of structure and the thinness of freedom. The way time expands when it is contained and contracts when it is released. These are not answers. They are observations. They are the notes I am taking as I sit in this chair, in this morning light, with this cold cup of tea that I still have not gotten up to replace. Maybe I will understand more as I go on. Maybe clarity will come. Or maybe this is what clarity looks like. Not a resolution, but a recognition. Not an explanation, but a staying with what is. Either way, I am here. The morning is here. The question is here. And for now, that is enough. There is something I have been noticing about anticipation. Not the excitement of looking forward to things I still have that, though it is quieter now, less urgent. I mean something different. I mean the weight of days not yet lived, of hours not yet used, of time that stretches ahead of me, waiting. When I was younger, this weight felt light. It felt like promise. The future was something I was moving toward, something I was building, something that would be better than the present, or at least different. I did not feel the weight of unspent days, because I was too busy spending them. Each day was a coin tossed into the fountain, a step on the path, a brick in the wall I was constructing. Now the weight is different. Now it feels heavier, not oppressive, not crushing, but present in a way it was not before. I am aware of the days ahead in a new way. I am aware that they are finite, and this awareness changes their texture, makes them feel more solid, more substantial, more like objects I am carrying than paths I am walking. I am not sure when this change happened. It was not sudden. There was no moment when I crossed a threshold and found myself on the other side. It was gradual, so gradual that I did not notice it until it was already complete. One day I looked up and realized that the future felt different, that the days ahead felt heavy instead of light, that I was no longer moving towards something, but simply moving, and the moving itself had become the point. I think about how I used to make plans, long-term plans, I mean, the kind of plans that stretch out over years, that assume a future that looks roughly like the present, that treat time as a resource to be allocated and spent. In my 30s and 40s, I made these plans constantly. I planned for my career, my finances, my children's education, my retirement. I thought in 5-year increments, in 10-year increments, in decades. The future was a landscape I was mapping, a territory I was claiming, a space I was filling with intention. I do not make those plans anymore, not because I've given up on the future, but because the future has become a different kind of place. It is shorter now, and less certain. I cannot see as far into it as I used to. The horizon has drawn closer, and what lies beyond it is hidden. This is not a sad thing, or rather, it is not only a sad thing. There is loss in it, yes, the loss of that expansive sense of possibility. That feeling that the future was a wide-open field and I could run in any direction. But there is also something else, something that might be peace, or acceptance, or simply a different relationship to time. When the future was vast, I lived in it. I was always projecting forward, always imagining what came next, always treating the present as a stepping stone to something else. The present was never quite enough. It was always incomplete, always reaching toward a completion that lay ahead. Now the future is smaller, and I live more in the present. Not because I have learned some technique or followed some practice, but simply because there is less future to live in. The present has expanded to fill the space that the future used to occupy. And this expansion, paradoxically, is part of what makes time feel so strange. Let me try to explain this more clearly. When I was younger, my experience of any given moment was always colored by what came next. If I was eating lunch, I was also thinking about the meeting that afternoon. If I was at the meeting, I was also thinking about picking up my children from school. If I was picking up my children, I was also thinking about dinner, and then the evening, and then the next day. My attention was layered. It was never fully in one place. It was always spread across the present and the near future, and sometimes the distant future too. This spreading was so constant, so automatic, that I did not notice it. It was simply how I experienced time. It was simply how I lived. Now the layering has thinned. The future that used to pull at my attention has released its grip. I am more fully in the present than I have ever been. When I drink my tea, I am mostly just drinking my tea. When I sit by the window, I am mostly just sitting by the window. The meetings are gone. The pickups are gone. The dinners that needed planning are gone. There is just this moment, and then the next moment, and then the next. You might think this would make the present feel more spacious, and in some ways, it does. The present is calmer now. It is less cluttered, less divided, less contested. I can be here in a way I could not be here before, but there is a cost. The cost is that the present, unmoored from the future, begins to feel thin. It begins to feel like it is not quite connected to anything, not quite leading anywhere, not quite part of a larger whole. And this thinness, this disconnection, is part of what makes time feel limited, even when it is not. When each moment was connected to the next, time felt like a rope I was climbing. I was always somewhere on the rope, always moving up or down, always part of a continuous strand that stretched above and below me. Now the rope has been cut. The moments are still here, but they are loose, unconnected, scattered. And somehow scattered moments take up less room than connected ones. They pass more quickly, leave less trace, way less in the hand. I have been trying to describe this to myself for months, maybe years. It is not easy to put into words. It is like trying to describe the color of water or the weight of light. The thing I am pointing at keeps slipping away just as I get close to it. But here is another way to say it. The days ahead have weight now. They are no longer promises. They are no longer possibilities floating in the abstract future, waiting to be actualized. They are more like objects, solid and finite, taking up space. And because they are finite, because I can sense their limit even if I cannot count them, they feel heavier. They feel like something I am carrying, rather than something I am moving through. And here is the strange part. This weight, which you might expect to make each day feel more significant, more precious, more full, this weight actually seems to make the days feel faster, as if the heaviness is a kind of density that accelerates time, as if the more I am aware of the finitude of days, the more quickly they pass. I do not understand this. I cannot explain it. I can only observe it, note it, sit with it. Sometimes I wonder if this is simply what it means to be older, if this is the natural condition of a life that has more behind it than ahead, if the weight of unspent days is just the weight of being human, and I am only noticing it now because there are fewer days left to obscure it. There is probably truth in that. There is probably no escaping it. The arc of a life has a shape, and the shape changes as you move along it. What feels one way at 30 feels another way at 60, and will feel yet another way at 80, if I am fortunate enough to reach it. But I do not think age explains everything. I think there is something more specific happening, something about the relationship between structure and time, between anticipation and duration, that is independent of age, something that anyone might experience at any stage of life, if the conditions were right. I think about people who retire early. I think about people who lose their jobs, their routines, their obligations. I think about people who suddenly find themselves with more time than they know what to do with. I suspect they feel something similar to what I am describing. I suspect they notice the same paradox: more time, but less of it. More hours, but smaller ones. More freedom, but a strange kind of weight. And I think about people on the other end of the spectrum. People who are so busy, so overwhelmed, so buried in obligation that they cannot catch their breath. I suspect their experience of time is different, almost opposite. They have no time, they say. They are always running out of it. But I wonder if, in the running out, there is also a kind of abundance, a sense that time is precious precisely because it is scarce, a feeling that each moment matters because there are so few of them. Maybe this is the cruel irony of time. When we have too little of it, we feel its weight in one way, the weight of pressure, of urgency, of not enough. When we have too much of it, we feel its weight in another way, the weight of finitude, of awareness, of days that sit heavily even as they slip away. I have not resolved this. I do not expect to resolve it. It is not the kind of thing that resolves. But I have noticed something that helps, or rather, something that changes the texture of the weight, even if it does not remove it. When I am engaged in something truly engaged, not just passing time, the weight lifts slightly, not because I am distracted from it, but because I am inside it. When I am reading a book that absorbs me, or having a conversation that matters, or working on something that requires my full attention, the weight of unspent days becomes less noticeable. It is still there, in the background, but it is no longer the foreground. It is no longer the dominant feature of my experience. This is not a solution. It is not a technique. It is just an observation. Engagement changes the feeling of time, not the amount of it, but the texture of it, the quality, the way it sits in the hand. And so I try to engage. I try to find things that matter to me, that ask for my attention, that invite me into them. I am not always successful. Sometimes the days are flat, empty, unengaged. Sometimes I sit in this chair, and the weight is all I can feel. But sometimes I find something. A book. A conversation. A thought that takes hold and will not let go. And in those moments, the weight lifts. The days stop feeling like objects and start feeling like currents. I am moving again. Not toward anything in particular, just moving, and the moving is enough. The morning is well advanced now. The light is no longer gray. It is not quite gold either. The clouds are still there, filtering everything through a soft gauze. But it is lighter than it was. The world outside the window is waking up. I can hear cars in the distance, and somewhere, a dog bark. I should get up. I should make a new cup of tea. I should start the day, whatever that means. But I stay in the chair a little longer, not because I have more to say, but because sitting is its own kind of saying. Because staying is its own kind of answer to the question I have been carrying. Why does time feel more limited as we grow older, even when our days become less structured than before? I do not know. But I am learning that not knowing is not the same as not living. That the question can be carried without being answered. That the weight of unspent days can be felt without being resolved. And maybe that is something. Maybe that is more than something. Maybe that is all any of us can do. Carry what we carry, feel what we feel, and stay with it long enough to see what it becomes. I remember the last day I worked, not the events of the day. Those have blurred, as most days blur when enough time has passed. But I remember the feeling of it, the sense that something was ending, something that had been a constant for so long that I had stopped noticing it was there. Work was scaffolding. I see that now. It was the framework around which my days were built. Not just the hours I spent in the office, but the hours before and after, too. The waking up to go somewhere, the coming home from somewhere, the weekends that were defined by not being work days, the vacations that were defined by not being work weeks. Everything was oriented around this central structure, this skeleton of obligation that held my life upright. And then, one day, the scaffolding came down. I had prepared for it, or thought I had. I had imagined what my life would look like without work, had made lists of things I wanted to do, had told myself stories about the freedom that was coming. And some of those stories were true. Some of that freedom was real. But what I had not prepared for was how strange it would feel when the scaffolding was gone, how disoriented, how exposed. It was not sadness, exactly. I was ready to stop working. I was tired, in the way you get tired after decades of doing the same thing, even if the thing is good. I wanted rest. I wanted ease. I wanted to wake up in the morning without an alarm. But when the rest came, it came with something else, something I had not expected. A kind of vertigo, a sense that the walls had been removed and now I was standing in an open field, with no landmarks, no paths, no directions. The freedom I had imagined was real, but it was also overwhelming. It was like being released into a space so large that I could not find my bearings. In those first months, I kept looking for the scaffolding. I kept expecting it to reappear. I would wake up in the morning and feel, for a moment, the old urgency, the sense that there was somewhere I needed to be, something I needed to do. And then I would remember, no, there is not anymore. This memory, this reminder, was strange. It was both relieving and disquieting. Relieving because the pressure was gone. Disquieting because the pressure had been holding something up, and now that thing was sagging, settling, finding a new shape that I did not yet recognize. Time moved differently in those months. The days were longer than they had been in years, but they were also shapeless. They had no peaks and valleys, no rhythm, no pulse. They just went on, hour after hour, until suddenly it was evening, and I was not sure what I had done. I tried to impose structure. I made schedules for myself, lists of activities, goals for each day, and these helped a little. They gave me something to hang the hours on, but they did not feel the same. They were artificial, self-imposed, optional. I could ignore them if I wanted, and knowing I could ignore them changed everything. It took away the weight, the necessity, the non-negotiable quality that had made work time feel so different from free time. I think about this a lot now. The difference between imposed structure and chosen structure. The difference between having to do something and deciding to do it. When I was working, most of my time was not mine. It belonged to my job, my employer, my responsibilities. I did not choose to spend 8 hours a day in an office. I had to. The hours were claimed before I woke up, allocated by forces outside my control. And this claiming, this allocation, gave those hours a kind of reality that other hours did not have. Now all my hours are mine. I choose what to do with them. I choose when to wake, when to eat, when to rest, when to engage. The choosing is total. The freedom is complete. And yet the hours feel less real. They feel less substantial, less weighty, less significant. Because I choose them, they seem to matter less. Because they are not required, they do not have the gravity that required things have. This is paradoxical. You would think that chosen hours would feel more meaningful than imposed hours. You would think that freely given time would have more value than compulsory time. But in my experience, the opposite is true. The hours I choose feel more like suggestions than statements. They feel provisional, negotiable, uncertain. They do not have the solidity of hours that were not up to me. I have wondered about this. I have tried to understand why freedom would diminish rather than enhance the feeling of significance. And the best I can come up with is, this structure externalizes meaning. When something is imposed on me, the meaning is built into the imposition. I do not have to justify it, defend it, create it from scratch. It is given to me, along with the obligation. The job matters, because the job is required. The hours matter because the hours are not optional. When the structure falls away, the meaning has nowhere to live. It is no longer externalized, no longer given. It has to be found, created, invented. And this invention is exhausting. It is a daily labor that never ends. Each morning I wake up, and the question is there: what will this day be for? And each morning I have to answer it myself, with no one to tell me, no obligation to point the way. This is freedom. This is also burden. The two are not as separate as I once thought. I watch younger people sometimes, not with envy exactly, but with a kind of curiosity. I watch how they move through their days, how they complain about their obligations, how they long for free time. And I understand. I was like them once. I longed for exactly what I have now. I imagined that if only the obligations were removed, life would be simpler, easier, lighter. But I have learned that obligations are not only burdens. They are also anchors. They hold us in place. They give us something to push against, to organize around, to define ourselves by. Without them, we drift, not into happiness, but into a kind of groundlessness, a kind of freedom that is also a kind of loss. This is not an argument for obligation. I am not saying that work is better than rest, or that busyness is better than leisure. I am only saying that the transition from one to the other is not what I expected. That when the scaffolding falls away, what remains is not the pure, unobstructed view I had imagined. What remains is a landscape without landmarks, a sky without horizon, a day that extends in all directions with no edges to give it shape. I have adapted in time. I have found ways to create structure for myself, ways to anchor the days, ways to give them shape without the external demands that used to do this work for me. I have rhythms now: morning tea, afternoon walks, evening reading. I have projects that I return to, conversations that I value, activities that give the hours meaning. But the adaptation is not complete. It never will be. There is still, beneath everything, a feeling of openness that is almost vertiginous. A sense that the days could go any direction, or no direction, and no one would know or care. This is not a complaint. I am not unhappy. I am simply noticing. I am simply staying with what is, trying to understand it, trying to see it clearly. When the scaffolding falls away, what remains? What holds us up when nothing is required? What gives shape to days that have no predetermined form? I do not have answers to these questions, but but I have the questions. And the questions, I have learned, are their own kind of company. They keep me from drifting too far. They anchor me, in their way, to something solid. There is a particular kind of time that I have become familiar with in these years. I do not have a name for it. It is not leisure exactly, because leisure implies rest from work, and I no longer have work to rest from. It is not retirement exactly, because retirement implies a completion, an arrival, and I have not arrived anywhere. I am still traveling, still in motion, still becoming something I do not yet understand. This time is more like a pause, an extended pause between what was and what will be, a suspension, a waiting, a long-held breath. But waiting for what? That is what I cannot answer. I am not waiting for anything, as far as I know. There is no event on the horizon, no destination I am moving toward. There is just this, day after day, hour after hour, the ongoing now that has no particular aim or direction. Maybe this is what it means to be old. Not wise, not finished, not complete, just paused, just suspended in a present that does not lean forward, that does not anticipate, that simply is. I sit with this. I sit with all of it. The fallen scaffolding, the groundlessness, the days that extend without edges, the freedom that is also burden. And I notice that, even in the sitting, something happens, something small, something that might be called meaning, or might just be called attention. The act of noticing gives the hours something they did not have before. The act of staying with the question gives the question weight. This is what I have now, not the scaffolding, not the structure, not the external demands that used to give my days shape. Just this, the noticing, the staying, the slow, patient work of being present to what is. It is not what I expected. It is not what I planned for, but it is here, and I am here. And somehow, that is enough. Let me tell you about yesterday afternoon. Nothing happened. Or rather, nothing that would count as happening if you were measuring events. If you were looking for plot points, if you were expecting the kind of story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I finished lunch around 1 o'clock. Lunch was unremarkable. A sandwich, some fruit, a glass of water. I ate it at the kitchen table, looking out the window at the backyard. The trees are still bare, though I can see buds forming on some of the branches. Spring is not far off. A few more weeks, maybe. After lunch, I washed the dishes. This took perhaps 10 minutes. Then I dried my hands, went to the living room, and sat down in the chair. The same chair I am sitting in now. The one by the window. And then I sat. I sat for what might have been an hour, or might have been 2. I did not check the clock. I was not waiting for anything, or anticipating anything. I was just sitting, looking at the room, feeling the weight of my body in the chair, noticing the way the light moved across the floor as the clouds shifted outside. I thought about things, but the thinking was not purposeful. It was more like weather moving through the mind, passing thoughts, fragments of memory, wisps of feeling that came and went without leaving much trace. I thought about my daughter, briefly. I thought about a book I had been reading. I thought about something that happened years ago, something I had not thought about in a long time. And I let it pass, without holding on to it. After a while, I got up and made tea. This took perhaps 5 minutes. Then I came back to the chair and sat again. The afternoon continued like this, unremarkably, until the light began to change toward evening. By 4 or 4:30, the quality of the light was different, softer, warmer, beginning to hint at the gold that comes before sunset. I noticed this. I appreciated it. I did not do anything about it. Then I made dinner, ate, read for a while, and went to bed. I tell you this not because it is interesting. It is not interesting, in the usual sense, but because it is typical. This is what many of my afternoons look like now. This is the texture of my days. And what I have noticed is that this texture, this absence of event, this long, slow nothing, feels different than I would have expected. It does not feel restful, exactly, though there is rest in it. It does not feel boring, exactly, though there is boredom in it, sometimes. It does not feel rich or poor, or full, or empty. It feels like time. That is the only way I can describe it. It feels like time itself, stripped of everything that usually obscures it. When I was busy, time was hidden inside activity. It was the medium I moved through, the invisible carrier of events. I did not feel time directly. I felt the things that happened in time. Now the things have fallen away, and time is what remains. Time and the room, and the light moving across the floor, and the weight of my body in the chair. This is what I meant earlier when I talked about the paradox of empty hours. When the hours are full, time is invisible. When the hours are empty, time becomes visible. And the visibility is strange, both a gift and a burden, a clarity and a weight. I did not know that time had a texture until the texture was all there was. I did not know that an afternoon could feel like a substance, like something I was sitting inside of, until there was nothing else to sit inside of. And now I know. I know that time is not just a container for events. It is its own kind of experience. It has its own quality, its own flavor, its own mood. An afternoon is not just the hours between noon and evening. It is a particular way of being in the world, a particular way of waiting without waiting, of resting without resting, of being present to nothing in particular. Yesterday afternoon, I looked at a plant on the windowsill. This sounds trivial. It is trivial. But I looked at it for a long time, longer than I have looked at anything in years, perhaps. It is a small plant, something with waxy leaves that my wife bought years ago. It has survived by doing almost nothing, requiring almost nothing. I water it once a week. It sits in the light. That is all. I looked at it, and I noticed things I had never noticed before. The way the leaves overlap, the way the light comes through the thinner parts, the way there are tiny imperfections, spots, marks, places where the leaf is not quite uniform. I noticed the soil in the pot, dark and compressed. I noticed a single fallen leaf that had landed beside the pot and I had never picked up. I do not know how long I looked at this plant. 5 minutes? 15? It did not matter. The looking was not for anything. It was not research or appreciation or mindfulness practice. It was just looking. Just attention given to something that asked for nothing and offered nothing in return. And in that looking, something happened. Not an event, not an insight, not a revelation, just a shift. A small settling, a sense that the afternoon was not empty after all, that the texture of time was rich enough to sustain attention, that nothing could be something if you let it. I have been thinking about attention lately, about what it means to attend to things when there is nothing that demands attention. When I was working, my attention was spoken for. It was claimed by tasks, responsibilities, problems that needed solving. I did not have to decide where to put my attention. The demands of the day decided for me. Now my attention is unclaimed. It is free to go where it wants, rest where it wants, linger where it wants. And this freedom, like all the other freedoms I have been describing, is both gift and burden. The burden is that attention needs direction. It needs something to attend to. Without direction, it wanders, scatters, dissipates. It becomes thin, spread too wide, unable to settle on anything long enough to see it clearly. The gift is that I can choose. I can decide to attend to things that would have gone unnoticed before. The plant on the windowsill, the light on the floor, the sound of my own breathing in the quiet room. These are not important things. They are not significant in any worldly sense, but they are real. They are here. And when I attend to them, they become more real, more here, more substantial. My attention gives them weight, and their weight, in turn, grounds me. There is a kind of seeing that only happens in empty time. I have come to believe this. When the hours are full, we look at things in order to use them, evaluate them, respond to them. We look instrumentally, with purpose. Our seeing is shaped by what we need. When the hours are empty, we can see differently. We can see without needing. We can look at something simply because it is there, simply because our eyes can rest on it, simply because the looking itself is satisfying. This kind of seeing is not better than instrumental seeing. It is just different. It is a luxury. In a way, the luxury of having nowhere to go and nothing to do. The luxury of attention freed from purpose. I did not know this luxury existed until I found myself inside it. I did not know that seeing could be an activity in itself, a way of spending time, a way of being present that asks nothing and offers much. Yesterday afternoon, after I looked at the plant, I looked at my hands. They are old hands now, thinner than they were, more veined, spotted in places. The knuckles are more prominent. The skin is looser, creased in ways it was not creased before. I know these hands. I have known them all my life, but I had not really looked at them in years, maybe decades. They were just my hands, the instruments I used to do things, the appendages I took for granted. Looking at them, I noticed how much they had changed. I noticed how much history was written in them, not literally, but in the way they had aged, the way they had weathered, the way they showed the passage of time that the mirror sometimes hides. And I felt something. Not quite emotion, but something adjacent to emotion, a quiet acknowledgement, a recognition that these hands had carried me through a life, had held things and made things and touched things, and now they were resting in my lap, in this chair, in this afternoon that was going nowhere. There was intimacy in this, intimacy with my own body, with my own time, with the fact of being here, in this moment, in this room, with nothing to do but notice. I am not claiming this is a revelation. It is not profound. It is just what happens when you have an afternoon and nothing to fill it with. You look at things, you notice things, you let your attention rest on ordinary objects, and find that they are not as ordinary as you thought. Or maybe they are exactly as ordinary as you thought. Maybe that is the point. Maybe the ordinary, attended to, is enough. The light is different now than it was when I started writing this. It is past midday, I think. The shadows have shifted. The room feels slightly different, though I could not say how. I am still in the chair. I have not moved, except to turn my head, to look around, to notice the things that are here with me. And I think this is what remains. When the busyness ends and the obligations fall away, when the scaffolding comes down and the days stretch out without shape, this is what remains. Attention, presence. The slow, patient looking at what is. It is not a solution. It is not a cure for the strangeness of time, the way it feels more limited even as it feels more open. But it is something. It is a way of being with the hours, rather than simply enduring them. And for today, that is enough. I have been thinking about memory, about how the past feels from where I am standing now. When I was younger, the past seemed vast. Each year had its own weight, its own density, its own set of memories that distinguished it from every other year. I could tell you what happened when I was 10, when I was 15, when I was 25. The memories were discrete, locatable, anchored to specific times. Now the past seems smaller, not in the sense that I have forgotten things. I have forgotten things, of course, but that is not what I mean. I mean that the past has compressed. The years have folded together, lost their distinctness, merged into something more uniform. I notice this when I try to remember things. When was that trip we took? Was it 15 years ago or 20? When did I start that job? When did I leave it? The events are still there, in memory, but the timeline has blurred. The anchors have come loose. Things float in a general past, rather than a specific one. This compression, I think, is part of why time feels more limited now. When the past was vast and differentiated, the present felt like one more chapter in a long and varied book. There was so much behind me, so much that had happened, that the future seemed similarly expansive. If I had lived through so many distinct years, surely there were many more distinct years to come. But now the past has shrunk. The years behind me have folded together, become less numerous in memory than they were in actuality. And this shrinking changes the math. It changes the feeling of how much time there is. If the past seems smaller, then the whole of life seems smaller. And if the whole of life seems smaller, then the portion that remains seems smaller too. The finitude is not just in the future. It is in the retrospective compression that makes the whole story feel shorter than it was. I think about my childhood sometimes, not specific memories, but the general feeling of it, the sense of endless summers, of years that stretched out like oceans, of time that moved so slowly I could not feel it moving at all. That feeling is gone now. I cannot recapture it. Even when I remember my childhood, I remember it as smaller than it felt at the time. I remember it as a chapter, a phase, a part of something larger. The endless summers have become finite, locatable, one section among many. This is what memory does. It takes what was experienced as infinite and renders it finite. It takes what was lived as vast, as makes it small. I do not resent this. It is simply the nature of memory, the way it works, the way it must work. We cannot carry the full weight of our past with us. We cannot hold every moment in its original size. We compress, we summarize, we reduce, and in the reducing, we lose something. The sense of infinite time that we had when we were young, the feeling that life would go on forever. But here's what I have noticed. The compression of memory affects not just the past, but the present too. When the past feels vast, the present has room to be vast as well. There is space in the mind for long thoughts, slow experiences, hours that unfold without hurry. The present inherits something from the past's amplitude. When the past feels compressed, the present inherits that compression. The mind has less room for slowness. The hours feel more densely packed, even when they are not. The sense of time passing quickly extends backward and forward, coloring everything with the same urgency. I am not sure why this is. I am not sure how the feeling of the past affects the feeling of the present, but I am sure that it does. The two are connected, tangled, part of the same fabric. And the fabric, as I age, seems to be tightening. The weave is getting denser. The spaces between threads are shrinking. Sometimes I try to expand the past deliberately. I try to remember things more slowly, more carefully, more fully. I pick a year, any year, and I try to reconstruct what happened that year. Where did I live? What was I doing? Who was I with? This is harder than it sounds. The memories come in fragments, not in continuous narrative. I remember an image, a feeling, a moment, but I cannot always place it. I cannot always connect it to the larger story. It floats, unmoored, part of a past that has lost its organization. But when I stay with it, something happens. The fragments start to accumulate. One memory leads to another. The year begins to take shape, slowly, incompletely. And as it takes shape, it takes up more room. It becomes larger in my mind than it was before I started remembering. This is not recovery. I am not reclaiming the full weight of the past, but I am pushing back, a little, against the compression. I am reminding myself that the past was larger than it now seems, that the years were longer than memory suggests, that the life I have lived was more extensive than the summary I carry around in my head. I wonder sometimes if this is part of what it means to grow old, not just to have a longer past, but to have a past that has shrunk, to live with a history that has been compressed, reduced, made manageable by the mind's need to economize. The young live with a short past that feels long. The old live with a long past that feels short. This asymmetry is strange, and I do not fully understand it, but I feel it. I feel it every day, in the way the years behind me seem closer together than they were, in the way the decades feel like seasons, in the way a life that has taken more than 60 years to live can be summarized in a few sentences. And this compression, this shrinking of the past, contributes to the feeling I have been circling around this whole time, the feeling that time is more limited now, even though my days are less structured. It is not just that the future is shorter, it is that the whole of life feels shorter. The past has been compressed, and the compression extends forward, making everything feel more compact, more finite, more balanced. When I wake up in the morning, I do not just feel the day ahead of me. I feel the whole of my life in some vague, inchoate way. And the feeling is of something that has already happened, something that is already mostly complete, something that has less room left than it seems to have. This is not despair. It is not fear. It is just the texture of time, experienced from inside a life that has more past than future. I have tried to describe this to people, and mostly they do not understand. They think I am talking about mortality, about the fear of death, about the awareness that life ends. And I am talking about those things, partly. But I am talking about something more immediate, too. Something about the experience of time, right now, in this moment, in this ordinary afternoon. The compression is not just about death. It is about how the past shrinks, and the present inherits that shrinking. It is about the strange math of memory, where more years equal less time, where a longer life feels shorter as it goes on. I do not know how to resolve this. I do not think it can be resolved. It is simply the condition of being here, in this body, at this age, with this much life behind me. But I can notice it. I can name it. I can sit with it, the way I have been sitting with all these questions, and see what emerges. What emerges, mostly, is a kind of gentleness. A gentleness toward myself, toward my compressed past, toward the time that remains. I cannot expand the past back to its original size. I cannot make the years longer than memory allows. But I can be gentle with what I have. I can hold the compression lightly, without resentment, without regret. This is not wisdom. It is just practice. The practice of being here, with what is, with the time that I have and the time that I remember. And maybe that is enough. Maybe the compression is not something to fight, but something to accept. Maybe the shortening of the past is just what happens. And the task is not to reverse it, but to live well within it. There is a particular kind of absence that comes with age. I am not sure how to describe it, but I want to try. It is not the absence of people, though that is part of it. I have lost people, friends, family, colleagues over the years. Each loss has left a space, a gap where someone used to be. And these spaces accumulate. They add up. The world becomes more populated by absences, by the ghosts of those who are no longer here. But what I am trying to describe is something different, something less specific. It is the absence of futures that were once possible but are no longer. The paths not taken, the choices not made, the versions of life that did not happen. When I was young, these alternate futures were still alive. They had not been foreclosed yet. I could still become a different kind of person, live a different kind of life, choose a different path. The branching points were still ahead of me, still open, still humming with possibility. Now, most of those branches have closed. The choices have been made. The paths have been walked or not walked. The life I have is the life I have, and the lives I might have had are gone. Not just in actuality, but in possibility. This is a strange kind of loss. It is not the loss of something I had. It is the loss of something I might have had. Something that existed only as potential, as dream, as the shimmer of possibility on the horizon. And yet, it is real. The absence of these unlived lives is present in its way. It is here with me, in this room, in this chair, in this afternoon. It is part of the texture of being old. I think about this when I watch young people, not with envy, not with longing, but with a kind of recognition. They still have the branching ahead of them. They still have paths to choose, lives to live, possibilities that have not yet been foreclosed. I remember what that felt like. The sense of openness, of potential, of not yet. The feeling that the future was a wide field, and I could run in any direction. That feeling is gone now. Not completely. There are still choices to make, still paths to take, but the range has narrowed. The field is smaller. The directions are fewer. And this narrowing, this closing of possibilities, is part of why time feels more limited. It is not just that the years ahead are fewer. It is that the years ahead are more constrained. They have less room for surprise, for deviation, for the unexpected turn that leads somewhere entirely new. I do not say this with regret, or rather, I do not say it only with regret. There is loss in it, yes, but there is also relief. The burden of possibility is heavier than we realize when we are young. The weight of all those potential lives, all those branching paths, all those choices yet to be made. It is exhausting in its way. Now the weight is lighter, not because I am more at peace necessarily, but because there is less to carry. The unlived lives have been released. They are no longer waiting for me to choose them. They are gone, and in their going, they have left a kind of space. The space is strange. It is the space of what did not happen. The presence of absence, as I said at the beginning. It is not empty, exactly. It is filled with the shapes of things that almost were, that might have been, that existed as real possibilities before they closed. I think about a choice I made decades ago, a choice that seemed small at the time, but turned out to determine much of what came after. I will not say what the choice was. It does not matter, really. What matters is that there was a moment when things could have gone differently. A fork in the road, as the cliché has it. And I took one fork, not the other. At the time, I did not feel the weight of the choice. I did not know that I was closing off an entire branch of possible futures. I just did what seemed right, or what seemed easiest, or what seemed most aligned with who I was at that moment. Now, looking back, I can see the other branch. I can see the life I did not live, the person I did not become, the experiences I did not have. They are ghostly, indistinct, more impression than image. But they are there. They are part of the landscape of my past, even though they did not happen. Is this regret? I am not sure. It does not feel like regret exactly. It feels more like awareness. The awareness that every choice forecloses other choices, that every path taken is also paths not taken, that the life I have is made not only of what I did, but of what I did not do. This awareness is part of being old. The young do not have it, or do not have it fully. They're too busy making choices, too absorbed in the forward motion of their lives to feel the weight of what they are closing off. But I feel it now. I feel the presence of the absences. I feel the shape of the unlived lives hovering around the life I have lived. And this feeling, this awareness, is part of what makes time feel different. When the possible futures are still open, time feels expansive. There is so much that could happen. So many directions things could go. The future is not a single line, but a spreading fan, an ever-widening cone of possibility. When the possible futures have closed, time feels narrower. The fan has collapsed into a line. The cone has become a tunnel. There is still future ahead, but it is more constrained, more predictable, more determined by what has already happened. I am in the tunnel now. That is not a complaint. It is just a description. The tunnel has its own qualities, its own textures, its own beauty even, but it is narrower than the fan. It allows less room for the unexpected. And yet, I am still surprised sometimes. I still encounter things I did not expect, feel things I did not anticipate, discover aspects of myself I did not know were there. The tunnel is not as narrow as it seems. The closing of possibilities is not as complete as it appears. Maybe this is the grace of being old, the recognition that even in the narrowing, there is still room for something new, that even in the presence of absence, there is still presence, that the life I have, constrained as it is still a life, still capable of growth, of change, of unexpected turns. I have been sitting with this thought for a while now. The presence of absence, the shape of the unlived lives, the way they hover around the edges of the life I have lived. It is not a comfortable thought, exactly, but it is a true thought. And there is comfort in truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable. The absences are here. The possibilities that closed are here. They are part of who I am, part of how I experience time, part of why the days feel more limited, even as they stretch out empty before me. And maybe that is okay. Maybe the presence of absence is not something to mourn, but something to acknowledge, to carry lightly, to let be. The light is changing again. The afternoon is moving toward evening. I have been sitting in this chair for hours now, I think, though I have not checked the clock. The room is the same, the chair is the same, but the light is different. And I am different too, in some small way. The thinking I have been doing has changed something, or revealed something, or simply made visible something that was already there. I do not know what to do with this. I do not think there is anything to do. There is just this: the noticing, the naming, the staying with what is, the presence of absence, the unlived life, the time that remains. I am here. I am still here. And for now, that is enough. I have been thinking about staying, not staying in the sense of not leaving. I am not going anywhere. There is nowhere I need to go, but staying in a different sense, staying with something, staying inside an experience, rather than moving on to the next one. When I was younger, I did not stay. I moved. I was always in motion, always transitioning, always on my way from one thing to another. This was partly the nature of busy life. There was always somewhere to be, something to do, someone to meet. But it was also something more. It was a habit of mind, a way of being. I did not know how to stay. I only knew how to go. Now I am learning to stay, slowly, imperfectly, with many failures and false starts. But I am learning. What does it mean to stay? I am not entirely sure, but I have some sense of it, some feeling for what it involves. Staying means not rushing to the next thought. It means letting a thought complete itself, unfold at its own pace, reveal what it has to reveal before I move on. Staying means not reaching for distraction. It means sitting with discomfort, with boredom, with the strange vacancy of empty time, without trying to fill it or escape it. Staying means being here, just here, in this chair, in this room, in this moment that is neither special nor unspecial, just real. This is harder than it sounds. The habit of moving is deep. It is wired into me, into my nervous system, into the way my mind works. For decades, I practiced moving. I got very good at it. I could transition smoothly, shift attention quickly, juggle multiple things at once. Now I am practicing staying, and I am not very good at it yet. I find myself reaching for the phone, the book, the window, anything to break the stillness. I find myself thinking ahead, planning, anticipating, anything to escape the present moment. But sometimes I catch myself. Sometimes I notice the reaching and let the hand fall back. Sometimes I feel the forward lean and settle back into the chair. And in those moments, something shifts. The quality of time changes. It becomes thicker, more present, more substantial. The hour I am in stops being a prelude to the next hour and becomes its own thing, complete in itself. I think staying is connected to everything I have been describing: the paradox of empty hours, the weight of unspent days, the fallen scaffolding, the compression of memory, the presence of absence. All of these are related to staying, or to the failure to stay. When we do not stay, time slips past. It moves too quickly because we are not present. We are always leaning forward, reaching for what comes next. And the present moment passes unnoticed, like scenery glimpsed from a speeding train. When we stay, time slows. Not literally, not in any measurable way, but experientially. The moment expands because we are inside it, paying attention to it, giving it the gift of our presence. This is why time felt endless in childhood. Children stay. They are present to each moment because they have nowhere else to be, nothing else to reach for. They are not yet in the habit of moving. They are still in the habit of staying. And this is why time feels compressed in age. We have practiced moving for too long. The habit is too deep. We cannot stay, or we struggle to stay. And so the moments pass, and the days pass, and the years pass, and we wonder where they went. But habits can be changed. This is the hope I carry. Even deep habits, even habits that have been practiced for decades, can be changed. It is not easy. It is not quick, but it is possible. I know this because I am changing. Slowly, incrementally, almost imperceptibly, but changing nonetheless. The practice of staying is taking hold. The moments are becoming thicker. The time is becoming more present. This is not a cure. It does not reverse the compression of memory or fill the presence of absence. It does not make time infinite again, the way it was in childhood. But it makes a difference, a small difference, a difference that feels, on some days, like enough. I remember a moment a few weeks ago when I stayed. I was sitting in this chair, as I often sit. The light was coming through the window. There was nothing unusual about the moment. Nothing that set it apart from any other moment. And yet I noticed it. I noticed the light, the chair, the weight of my body, the quality of the air. I noticed without judgment, without analysis, without reaching for anything else. I just noticed. And the noticing became staying. The moment stretched. Time thickened. I was inside the experience rather than outside it. Present rather than absent. Here rather than on my way somewhere else. It lasted perhaps a minute, perhaps less. Then the habit of moving kicked in, and I was reaching for something, thinking about something, anticipating something. The moment closed. The staying ended, but I had tasted it. I had felt what it was like. And that taste, that feeling, has stayed with me. It is what I am practicing now. It is what I am trying to cultivate, in my small, imperfect way. I do not claim to be good at this. I am not a master of staying. I am a beginner, an amateur, a student who has much to learn. But I am learning. That is what matters. The learning itself is a kind of staying. Staying with the practice, staying with the difficulty, staying with the slow, incremental progress that may or may not lead anywhere. And maybe that is the point. Maybe the point is not to arrive somewhere, to achieve some state of perfect presence, to solve the problem of time once and for all. Maybe the point is just to stay with the learning, to stay with the practice, to stay with the question. Why does time feel more limited as we grow older, even when our days become less structured than before? I do not know. I still do not know. But I am staying with the question. I am staying with the not knowing. And the staying itself is an answer of a kind, not a solution, but a response. Not a conclusion, but a way of being. The evening is coming. I can feel it in the light, in the air, in the quality of the silence. The day is ending, as all days end. And tomorrow there will be another day, and another, and another, until the days run out. I do not know how many days I have left. No one knows. That is part of the condition, part of the mystery, part of what makes time feel so precious and so strange. But I know that I have this day, this hour, this moment, and I am learning to stay with it, to be present to it, to let it be what it is without reaching for what comes next. This is what I have. This is what any of us have. The present moment, given to us again and again, until it is not. And the choice, always the choice, to stay or to go. To be present or to be absent, to let time pass unnoticed or to notice it fully. I choose to stay, as best I can, as imperfectly as I must. I choose to stay. It is late now. The light is gone, or nearly gone. What comes through the window is the last of the dusk, that thin blue light that is neither day nor night, but something in between. I have been sitting in this chair for a long time, all day perhaps. I have not kept track. The hours have passed, one by one, and I have been here, thinking, noticing, staying. The question I began with is still here. It has not been answered. I did not expect it to be answered. Why does time feel more limited as we grow older, even when our days become less structured than before? I have circled this question all day. I have approached it from different angles, turned it over, looked at its facets. I have noticed things, named things, sat with things, but I have not solved anything. The question remains. The feeling remains. Time is still strange, still paradoxical, still not what I expected it to be. And maybe that is right. Maybe questions like this are not meant to be solved. Maybe they are meant to be carried, lived with, kept company. The question is a companion now. It walks with me through the days. It sits with me in this chair. It watches the light change and the hours pass. It does not demand an answer. It is content to be asked, again and again, for as long as I am here to ask it. I think about my father again, about how he sat in his chair in his final years and remarked on the speed of time. I understand him now. Not fully. I do not think anyone can fully understand another person's experience of time. But more than I did before. I understand the strangeness he was describing, the paradox, the compression, the weight of unspent days. I wish I could tell him. I wish I could sit with him again, in that chair by his window, and say, I understand now. I feel it too. But that chair is empty now. He is gone. His eye will be gone someday, and the understanding I have come to is mine to carry, not his to receive. This is the loneliness of time, that we each experience it alone, that we cannot share the inner texture of our hours, only describe them in words that never quite capture what we mean. But there is comfort in the describing. There is companionship in the attempt. Even if my words do not reach anyone, even if they fall short of what I am trying to say, the act of saying them is a kind of connection, a reaching out across the silence toward anyone who might be listening. So I will end here, not because I have finished, but because this is where the day has brought me, to this moment, this chair, this thin blue light. Tomorrow there will be more thinking, more noticing, more staying. The question will still be here, waiting. The paradox will still be here, unresolved. And I will still be here, if I am fortunate, to sit with them again. This is what I have. This is what any of us have. The ongoing present, given and given again, until it is not. And for now, for tonight, that is enough. The room is dark now. The light is gone. I can hear the sounds of evening, distant traffic, a neighbor's television, the settling of the house. I should get up. I should turn on a lamp, make dinner, do the things that evenings require. But I stay a moment longer, just a moment, just long enough to feel the day ending, to notice the transition from one state to another. The day is ending. The thinking is pausing. The question is resting. And I am here, still here. In the dark, in the quiet, in the time that remains.